state of California has filed a lawsuit against video game giant Activision Blizzard, alleging widespread harassment and wage discrimination against female staff.
The company, which makes Call of Duty, World of Warcraft, and Overwatch, is the first gaming company to be sued under a new state law that requires private employers to submit an annual report on pay data broken down by race, ethnicity, and sex, bringing inequalities in what has been a male-dominated industry to light. Joining us now to discuss is Democratic strategist and owner of JC Strategies, Jennifer Holdsworth-Karp, and Senior Director of Policy at the Conservative Partnership Institute, Rachel Bovard. Jennifer, I'm going to start with you. So with the Me Too movement, there's been, a lot of these types of allegations came to light in various different industries, especially amongst the entertainment industry. Why do you think the gaming industry seemed to escape that entirely?
Yeah, there was a perception from what I understand that because women were just breaking into the industry, that it took a while for a lot of these allegations to move forward. And you see that in a lot of quote unquote male dominated industry over the years. It happened in the law, it happened in politics, it happened in medicine, and now you see it with gaming. It's sort of directly proportional to when women actually got access to the positions in the industry. About 10 to 15 years later, these allegations kind of come to light. There are a lot of women that are afraid to talk about harassment because they're afraid that it's going to ultimately affect their career. And in a lot of cases, it does. They really stop with upward mobility in terms of promotions if they report harassment against them. So I'm not surprised that it took a long time for the allegations to come to light. I'm just glad that they finally did.
Rachel, this lawsuit is an interesting consequence of the transparency brought about by that law. What do you think of bringing that law nationally?
I think it depends a lot on a number of factors, right? I think just breaking down your employment by, gender, by race, by pay doesn't tell you everything. And I think that's definitely the case that we saw here as well, because it wasn't just that you had not a lot of women working there. You had a lot of women that were, exposed to a lot of a really just toxic climate and culture. And I think anyone who's read the details of the lawsuit, they had at various events a Cosby suite named after Bill Cosby, which is just frankly disgusting. And I think there was this tacit acceptance of this culture for a long time that I don't think necessarily manifests in just those numbers. Transparency and employment data is, I think, always good to have. It's always good for public policymakers. But I think ultimately, the climate inside a business is the choice of the executives in many cases. In instances like this, it's also the responsibility of employees to bring it to light. And it sounds like there were attempts to do that and attempts to address it. But I think the lawsuit, the courts will have to decide whether or not that was sufficient.
So while many entertainment giants like Disney and Sony receive constant attention, the LA Times argues that video game producers have been able to fly under the radar. But now more than 1,000 current and former employees are speaking out, signing a letter in support of the lawsuit. Jennifer, what's been the company's response to this?
Yeah, the company's response is that these are old allegations and that they've been taken care of. I don't find that response particularly satisfying, even if they are old allegations. I think that it requires some proof that operations have been changed to make sure that this is not the case anymore. I don't think that that's particularly satisfactory to say like, oh, you know what, that happened a long time ago, so it doesn't matter anymore. I think that they have to put forward a little bit more of an explanation of what actually fostered the environment for this to occur. How did they help and compensate victims? What is the environment now that exists to make sure that this doesn't happen again? And how are they going to prevent it in the future? I don't think any of that was included in the response from the company. So it left a lot to be desired.
Yeah, it really certainly did. The reports are really terrible. Rachel mentioned the Cosby Suite, and there's also cube crawls, kind of like a club crawl, but men would go around to cubicles and grope women. I mean, it's obviously the gaming industry is very dominated by men. And they were talking very explicitly about their sexual exploits. There was one woman who even ended up, unfortunately, committing suicide. She had been in a relationship with somebody at the company, a manager, a supervisor, and apparently he had shared nude photographs of her at a company party. I mean, it sounds like a very toxic environment and certainly does need to be brought to light, but it's really not getting a whole lot of widespread attention. I'm just wondering, do you think that people are, I mean, either of you could answer this, do you think that the Me Too movement has sort of waned and it's just kind of sitting in the background?
I don't know that I would say it's waned. I think that there's a much more vivid consciousness of this problem, and I think women also are much more willing to speak up now than perhaps they would have been, 5 or even 10 years ago. I think there's more structures in place for them to come forward and be protected, because the harsh reality of a lot of this is that for a long time, women were punished for speaking up. I mean, there was career reprisals, there was not getting ahead for all these, for saying things like this. So, I do think the Me Too movement did swing a pendulum very, very far. And so I do think there's also, people want due process. But at the same time, for people who like, Jeffrey Epstein and Bill Cosby and, C-suite executives, there's always been this say nothing, see nothing attitude. So I think the Me Too movement was very instructive in at least cracking that and, giving people, I think, both the incentive and the structures to come forward when they see a problem.
Well, Rachel, Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Guys.
And we'll have more Rising for you right after this.